speaker of the day, Raul from Aztec.
All right, how's everyone doing? I know we've had a lot of talks today. I know there's meant to be lightning, but we're in Istanbul. It's kind of raining. We're here for a crypto event. So what does lightning? Well, if the speaker works. So what does? What's happening?
Is it working?
Not really. Can we go to the next slide, if it's possible?
I think you're holding it upside down.
That would explain a lot. All right, so what does lightning actually mean? Well, apparently, if you hear a thunder crash, that means VCs are getting wrecked. And if there's a lightning strike, that means it's time for you to ape into DeFi protocols. And storm clouds means there's a lot of liquidity pools that need funding. All right, I didn't have many memes, so I wanted to do something fun or dumb. So this was it. And I did lie about not having memes. This is my final one. Basically, I am working as a protocol engineer and a product manager on the Aztec rollup that we are building. Aztec is a privacy-focused, privacy-centered first rollup. And unfortunately, that meant we had to let go of EVM and build our own kind of rollup architecture. But what exactly is Aztec? Over the last few years, some people have called up a public-private ZK rollup because we have a private state, but we aren't just a private rollup. We also have the public state, just like you have on Ethereum. We're called a hybrid ZK rollup because we have both things. We call the ZK rollup because we're a ZK rollup, like Scroll, Starkware, etc. But we do another round of ZK to enable privacy at the user level. Some people decide to call us an actual ZK rollup because in a normal ZK rollup, you don't actually hide much information. It's still kind of transparent. Others call us an encrypted ZK rollup, which is an easier way of understanding how we enable privacy. But how does this public-private blockchain kind of work? Because we have a lot of blockchains today that are private, but very few that can do both. Like I think Nick said from Fuel, at the private layer, we use UTXOs, so Merkle tree of notes, as we call it, basically UTXOs. And all of those things happen at the user level, whereas on the public side of things, we have private state, public state. The public state is kind of like Ethereum in that you have an account state tree model, so a giant Merkle tree that just stores everything, which is kind of similar to Ethereum, right? And of course, because we are a rollup, we can do L2 to L1 transactions just like you expect from a normal rollup. Now, I've used the word rollup a lot, but I haven't said where we are, what you can do with it. So 2 months back, we announced the Aztec Sandbox, which is live today. It's a local developer environment, like a Foundry, an Anvil, a Ganache, if you will. So you can just run the entire rollup infrastructure locally on your machine and start playing and understanding with this new era of blockchains that we are considering, where you can have privacy as well as transparency and combine all of them to enable this new kind of architecture. Just in the last 2 months, we've seen hundreds of developers and companies already building on us. And we have a lot of dedicated feedback partners that are helping us think about new standards, new ways of building things. But what exactly can you build? What are these features of this new fancy virtual machine or blockchain that we're building? One of them, as I've said, public state, public functions, but also private functions. So in the private function domain, the way you can think about it is a transaction might happen in the blockchain, but the only thing you'll know is that something happened. Or more clearly, someone did something in some state at some function of some contract. Privacy. On the public side, it's kind of like Ethereum, right? So you create your intent, your transaction, you send it to the sequencer, and then, again, because you're a ZK rollup, the sequencer would execute the function, and then they prove it, that they did it correctly. But the best thing about all of this is actually not just having private functions and public functions, but having composability. Having private functions called public, having public called private. This lets you interweave both of the states. This lets you do many cool things. For example, if you're using Uniswap, you kind of want to know how much liquidity there is. You kind of want to know how much the volume is. That stuff should be public. But what you want to do should be private. So you can't just operate in a complete private model, which is why we have the seamless composability. To give you another example, MakerDAO works on liquidations, right? To liquidate, you kind of need to know the price that someone put in or how much collateral they put in. That's why you need both private state but also public state. Similarly, on that note, you could also read historic public data. That changes the ways people can think about airdrops. For example, you could prove that at certain block X, you had a certain NFT all embedded into the blockchain. You don't need your own database. You don't need to write SQL queries. It's all a part of the blockchain itself. We also have account abstraction. Account abstraction is a bit of an overloaded term right now, one of the biggest buzzwords, I guess. What we mean by that at Aztec is you're not going to have any externally owned accounts. Everything is kind of like a contract address. There's no real differentiation between the two. But that also means you can add any kind of signatures that you want. You could do Face ID-based signatures instead of having seed phrases. You could also just have seed phrases. In fact, you could also have nothing. So like, you could just have a dummy account, just like signs whatever, without any encryption. You can play around with all kinds of things that you want. My personal favorite feature, though, is this thing called portals, which is, so you have a lot of, everyone knows about DeFi Legos on L1. Everyone knows about Legos in the similar way on L2. But we've not kind of seen Legos across L1 and L2. What I mean is, imagine a world where you could like submit a collateral of ETH on L1 and just mint DAI on L2, or do the reverse. Imagine a world where you could supply on L1, borrow on L2, and then kind of have composability across them, right? So you have arbitrary message passing that executes things on L2s. We have our own kind, instead of like not having approvals at all, there are sometimes approval is useful. So we have our own way of implementing that kind of short circuit some of the issues of approvals that we've seen on L1 over the last 5-6 years. And finally, as I said about historic trees, you could also have encrypted or unencrypted information sharing. That's very useful when you just want to pass data to someone but don't want anyone else to know about it. And the way you build all of this is using our language that we call Aztec Noir. Some of you might be familiar, but Aztec is known for creating a ZK language called Noir, which is just a way for you to write your own ZK circuit. We have created a framework on top of that to create a smart contract language out of it. So if you're familiar with ZK circuits, notoriously hard to write. Everything in Aztec is kind of like a ZK circuit. Now it's no more with Aztec Noir. It feels like you're writing a normal language. You don't need to think about weird ZK abstractions. It just kind of works in the same way Sway or Solidity or other languages would work. Finally, Aztec will launch decentralized. That means decentralized sequencers. That means decentralized provers. That means upgrades where multi-sigs don't actually control your funds and can't just run away if they have to. That's all. We're at the first step with our local developer environment called Sandbox. We're looking for people to build with it. We're looking for people to help us think about some of the open issues we have. You can find me on Twitter, or you can also, sorry, X, or you can find our docs in GitHub. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul. Before we move on to the panel talk, we got time for one question. Then, just in time, sir. There you go.
Yeah, I wanted to wait. It's a tough question. Are you concerned about regulation around privacy?
So Aztec is going to be a censorship-resistant, privacy-first layer 2. The point of blockchains was to be completely decentralized, just so people can do what we want. And for that, you need to be fully decentralized, and it only makes sense to be censorship-resistant. So we are doing this not necessarily for regulatory environments, but because we think rollups should just be decentralized. And we think if you're fully decentralized, censorship-resistant, people can do what they want. But also if people, you can see all flavors of things. If you want, you can finally have regulations such as KYC that can be private, encrypted. So like that's something we haven't been able to do in blockchains because they're completely public, right? Now you can. You can store your personal data completely privately and still have whatever regulatory environments you want to be in.
Thanks.